I want to chat with the Backstage Guide to Real Estate. Did you use Backstage because of you being a performer?
Yeah. Since the book came out and I published a book a few years ago, now I'm actually coaching people who actually want to go ahead and scale up their real estate, right? Scale up their real estate portfolios, but also a way where they can become work optional themselves.
A lot of owners in Manhattan are called slumlords, and it's because, they can't increase rents substantially.
Welcome to the Chris Salerno Show, your go-to for real estate, business, health, and family insight. I'm Chris Salerno, CEO of QC Capital. Each episode, we explore the latest trends and expert advice from industry leaders. Whether you're an investor, entrepreneur, or seeking balance, this show provides an inspiration you need. Join us and elevate your game on the Chris Salerno Show.
Welcome to the Chris Salerno Show. I am your host, Chris Salerno. Very excited to have Matt Picheny on the show. How long have I known you? It's been a while.
It's been a while, Chris.
Yeah, we've connected. You're so active on LinkedIn, and that's where we chat a lot, is through LinkedIn and email. But it's been quite a while.
I mean, I remember the first time I spoke with you. I was living in Boston at the time. I remember. I don't know why I remember, but I specifically remember speaking with you. I was in my backyard. And chatting with you, and that was the first time we spoke. So that's 6-7 years ago. Something like that.
Yeah, it was a while, because I remember we spoke about a year ago, and you said, "Chris, I'll never forget the time when we spoke first."
I don't know why. I just remember being in the backyard talking with you.
Hey, I love it. Well, hopefully it was a beautiful day out there too. But a bit about your background: real estate investor, coach, Tony Award winner, and author of the #1 best-selling book, Backstage Guide to Real Estate Investing. We're going to dive all into the real estate, but before we do, let's dial it back to who is Matt, and how did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Orlando, Florida.
Oh, I used to live in Lake Mary. Yeah.
I went to Lake Mary High School.
So I went to Lake Mary Middle, and I was going to go to Lake Mary High, then I moved, but I lived right behind Lake Mary Elementary School.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So that's a small world.
Small world. Very small world, yeah.
Yeah.
So I grew up there, graduated from high school, and decided to move to New York City to pursue a career in musical theater.
Okay.
Yeah, so I moved to New York, and I went to a musical theater conservatory called the American Musical and Dramatic Academy.
Wow.
And once I graduated from there, I was actually off being a working actor. 3 days after I graduated, I was off on tour, doing a tour of Aladdin to young audiences all across the great United States of America.
I love that. So and a lot of people, and I know some people that moved to Manhattan to become an actor, they weren't successful. So that is a tough and challenging and highly competitive, I would say, career, because you got a lot of people moving to LA, New York to try to, be a performer. How was that?
Well, I mean, I was a working actor, which is great, but, like just about every other working actor, I had trouble making a consistent living as an actor. I would get a gig and do a show, and I could get great reviews, and it could be a great show, but if it was only for 4 months or 6 months, then 4 to 6 months from then I would be out of work. No matter how well my job performance was.
Yeah,
right?
So then you'd have to find another job.
I have to find another gig. So I used to actually work at the Hard Rock Cafe.
Okay.
Before it was in Times Square, when it was up on 57th Street. And I learned, I started that while I was in school, actually, and learned all the different roles within the organization.
Yeah.
So I could bus tables, I could wait tables, I could be a host, I could sell T-shirts.
Wow.
Right? So I could do all the different things, so that when I did have time in between acting gigs, I could pick up shifts.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, you had to live. And so when did the acting gig start to really wind down?
Yeah, it was weird. I've had a lot of friends who over time, at one point or another, decide, hey, you know what? I'm no longer going to be an actor. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen that way for me. What happened was I started tinkering around with computers in the mid 90s, right?
Okay.
Like 1996 or so.
So that was right before the .com, in 2000.
Correct. So this was during the big .com heydays, right? So I ended up, instead of waiting tables at the Hard Rock Cafe, I would go to an office and hang out with a bunch of really cool, one of the reasons why I never went down the corporate road was I never wanted to be in a an office situation where I was like
in a cubicle,
wearing a suit and a tie, in a cubicle, but working at these what they were calling new media agencies back in the day. I was working with a lot of creative people, musicians, actors, people with different backgrounds like that, and working on developing some of the earliest websites on the internet.
Yeah.
Doing some, what at the time was cutting edge technology, which is all now defunct.
Oh, yeah.
Things like Flash and Cold Fusion. But we were doing really cool projects, and I was actually making decent money from doing that. So much so that the work was coming in like crazy.
Really?
Because there weren't enough people who were skilled
to understand it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I imagine today in the world, if you're a specialist in AI, there's
God,
not a lot of AI people, right?
No.
So at the time, nobody knew even how to code HTML.
Wow.
So I was very much in demand and had so much. I mean, people were literally throwing money at me to do these jobs because they needed someone to do the work. So I ended up working from home and then getting another desk in my little apartment in New York City, and would hire people that I knew and take like a small markup on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I got to the point where I needed a third desk and I didn't have any more room in my tiny little
So it's like, let's
Manhattan
go
apartment.
look for an office now.
So I got an office space.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I had my own boutique agency for about 5 years.
And so that time you were really just so busy because of the internet boom, and everyone was so intrigued with using, internet to find and search for things that it started, you started just leaving the acting, away. You just let it go.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't something that I had actually intended on doing. It wasn't like a conscious decision
You just got
I
so
made.
busy.
I got so busy with all the work, and
I'm sure you saw the money was a lot better than acting.
Well, the money was a lot better, but that wasn't the be all and end all for me.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I like money, but for me, it was something that I was enjoying doing. Like I was having a lot of fun doing it, and I was making money. So it was like, hey, this is a best of both worlds. What ended up happening was I actually, I got a call from a casting director.
Okay.
A director I had worked with was doing a production that was going to be coming to Broadway, and they wanted me to come in for it. And I went in, and I sang and danced and read for it, and I got a call back, but I didn't get the role. But when I went in for that audition, it became abundantly clear to me that I was not in shape to do that. I hadn't done any acting or singing or anything for a few years.
You've been out of the game.
Yeah, and I was out of shape, quite honestly, right? And I realized right then, well, first off, I had thought about, well, geez, if I actually get this gig and then I do it and I'm on, it would be off on tour for a year or so and then Broadway, what would I do with my business?
Oh, yeah.
And I have to find someone and hire someone to sort of manage the business while I was away. And that was a big concern of mine. But secondly, it was, I realized that I just was out of shape. I wasn't in the position where I could be going out on auditions and getting shows and booking gigs. And did I want to start training again? Yeah. Did I want to go back to that? And I thought about it and I was like, well, actually, no, I don't. I'm enjoying the life that I'm leading right now, having my own company. And I don't miss not being an actor. Yeah. And I had kind of just organically transformed into being a digital marketing person.
Wow. So talk to us about building that business.
Yeah, well, the business built itself.
Yeah.
You
saw an opportunity at the right time.
There was so much demand. I didn't have to do any marketing.
I was gonna say marketing.
I didn't have to do anything but basically be able to do work. I mean, I did work and did good quality work.
Oh yeah.
But that was really all that was necessary. It wasn't really hard for me to get gigs. I mean, I had people coming out of the woodwork reaching out to me until 2001 came along and the dot-com bubble burst. And all of my clients, either went out of business or were not spending money on their digital marketing efforts. And then I got a phone call from my landlord from the apartment I was living in who told me I had 90 days to get out of the apartment.
Wow.
So that was a big wake-up moment for me where I needed to figure out what I was going to do.
Oh my God, yeah.
And instead of renting another apartment, I actually ended up buying an apartment.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow.
Way uptown Manhattan in an area called Washington Heights.
Yep.
And I bought that place, and a little over 2 years later, I sold it, and I more than quadrupled my initial investment.
So was that the eye-opening of, hey, this is what real estate can do, and you now really, that light bulb went off to really dive into real estate?
Yeah, I mean, that was the big light bulb moment for me. And that's what, when I decided, look,
I got you right there.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I'm recovering from pneumonia.
Oh my goodness.
So I do have a little cough here and there. It was a big light bulb moment for me. And look, this was 2003. I was making six figures, okay? I had gotten a job. So once my boutique agency kind of imploded, Showtime, the television cable channel, offered me a position in-house. And so I was making good money, nice six-figure job, but that one real estate transaction was more than an entire year's worth of salary.
Wow.
And that's when I was like, okay, how do I figure out
how to do this at a higher level?
How do I do this again? Because that really was a big light bulb moment for me.
Most definitely.
And I spent the next 15 years trying to figure out how to replicate that.
So talk to us, so you're doing that early to mid 2000s. And was the specialty of flipping condos in Manhattan or, New York? Was that what you really, you did it once, you saw it was successful. Did you just keep replicating that for a little bit?
Not really. My path to where I am now, which is I focus squarely on multifamily syndication, but my path to that, I sort of touched every other aspect of real estate that's available. Yeah, I mean, the apartment that I had in Washington Heights could be considered a flip, I guess. But I was living there. It was a primary residence, but we did make improvements to not only the unit, but it was a co-op property, and it was dated, the lobby and the hallways. And I was on a co-op committee, and we actually renovated the hallways and the lobbies, which helped with the property value.
Oh, most definitely.
I mean, I didn't know it was called a value add back then, but it certainly was.
But you did a value add.
We did a value add. I instinctively did value add on all my early real estate deals without realizing it was a thing.
Yeah.
But, I went through a number of properties in New York, as primary residences that I would then fix up. I also built a home in Connecticut, in Litchfield, Connecticut, so Northwest Connecticut, from scratch.
Wow.
I had bought a piece of land, and then we knocked some trees down and built a house, and that was a short-term rental that I had.
Love that.
Way back before, Airbnb existed, but it was really just out on the West Coast at the time. It was not on the East Coast.
Really?
Yeah, Vrbo was back then, and Home Away.
So were you doing it like, back in the day? They still have it, but you have your property managers. If you go to the mountains, you can do short-term rentals like that. Did you have a property manager?
I was the property manager.
Wow, you did it all.
Yeah, which taught me that I didn't want to do property management.
Yeah,
That's when I learned that lesson. And from a marketing perspective, look, I had been building websites for quite some time, and there wasn't a heck of a lot of competition in Litchfield County. I built a website. I was good with my SEO, and I would come up in the search rankings.
There you go.
So, that worked out very well. Most of the bookings I did direct. It was not through Vrbo or Home Away, but I ended up using those a little bit. I did one with Airbnb.
Talk to us about how you survived 08, 09.
So 2008 and 2009, I owned the home up in Connecticut, which really wasn't affected by the housing crash. The value of the property went down, but the people who were renting it for the summer or for the winter weren't necessarily affected that much by 2008, and I was able to rent it out. So that property was never a cash flowing property. It was always something that just kind of broke even.
Correct.
Because I never I didn't even know how to underwrite back then, but I never underwrote it with the idea of renting it. My initial intention on that property was just have a vacation home, have a country home. And it turned out to be a rental by a whole bunch of different number of circumstances. But so that was fine. The property in Manhattan, though, went down in value quite precipitously. But I had purchased it about 4 years prior, so it had gone up quite a bit.
So you're still going to walk away with profit if you sold.
Yeah. Maybe a profit, maybe not. I wasn't really underwater, but I was probably around break even. But the bottom line was I didn't need to sell the property. And this was, it was a big moment for me. You mentioned that I have a book, and through the book, I share these 18 different keystone concepts that I've learned along my journey. And keystone concept number 5 is that cash flow is king. And this is something that my dad had told me when I bought my first apartment. He said, "You'll never lose money in real estate if you never have to sell." Really simple, but pretty profound, right?
Oh, most definitely.
So at that time in 2008, I didn't have to sell. I still had my job. I was still able to make those mortgage payments. And then, about 7 years later, I ended up selling the property and did very well, made a nice profit because things turned around.
Most definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the biggest thing. I mean, the only property I've ever really lost money on was because we had a property and we needed to sell it.
Yeah.
We didn't have the cash to sustain it at the time, and that was a loss.
Yeah.
But as long as you have the capital to carry yourself forward, real estate, at least since the dawn of time, has always gone up in value.
Always. And I think it always will, over time. What was that eye-opening experience to say, okay, let's dive into the multifamily industry?
So I moved to completely out of the blue. My wife got a job opportunity for us.
Okay.
Well, for her. That was in Miami, Florida.
Yeah.
And it would require me to give up my lucrative job in New York. At this point, I had worked my way up to being a vice president at digital advertising agencies. But it was a really great opportunity for her. And we had a 1-year-old. And it was kind of like, all right, well, if we're going to do it, now's the time to do it. Because once our kid's in school, it's going to be very difficult to move. So we took it. We moved down to Miami, Florida. And Erica was working her job that she had gotten down there. And I was looking for jobs in the advertising agency world. It's a completely different group of people down there, completely different network. In New York, I was getting pulled out of one job, recruited into another, into another, into another.
Oh, yeah.
In Miami, I didn't know anybody. And I was out there looking for jobs, and I was also listening to an audio book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So I'm listening to Robert Kiyosaki's book, talking about creating passive income streams, and that's the way to, financial freedom and getting out of the rat race. Meanwhile, I'm out there interviewing for these agency jobs, and I had worked in agency life for, 15 years at this time. I was burned out. I didn't want to do it anymore, but I think I kind of felt like I needed to. And I was also listening to the Hamilton cast recording. So Hamilton had come out on Broadway about a year before. It was a big, big hit. We loved the show, and we had actually invested in the show.
Oh, wow.
So we were investors in the show, big fans of the show. So we were constantly listening to that cast recording. So in between sessions of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I would pop on Hamilton and listen to it. And one day, I popped on Hamilton, and there's an early song in the show called My Shot, where the lead character is talking about, hey, he's young, and he's scrappy, and he's hungry, and he's not going to throw away his shot. He's going to go for it. Yeah. And I had an epiphany. I was like, wait, why am I throwing away my shot here? Why aren't I? I mean, real estate had been something I'd always done as a hobby. I'd done pretty well with it. Why was I trying to get into this job, get back into the rat race I hated when I could do real estate full time? And so I talked with my wife and decided to make the real estate thing full time. But I didn't really know about multifamily syndication at the time. I just knew I wanted to do real estate. And so I started off fixing and flipping properties.
Yeah. And that's how I originally started off as a broker, and then fixing and flipping. And then I figured out multifamily syndication through Joe Fairless. So what was that, so when you're getting into it, what did you go and search for books? Did you go into a conference to really say, oh, multifamily syndication, this is a whole different world, a whole different, realm of real estate investing?
Yeah, I first heard about multifamily syndication, oddly, at the time on a podcast, because at the time, there were no podcasts talking about syndication at all. But somebody had mentioned something about pooling capital together, and that it was called syndication. So I was like, wait, what is this? And I started researching it online, looking for podcasts, books. So I devoured everything that I possibly could on the subject. And then I started going to some conferences as well.
Yeah.
And eventually ended up joining a mentorship group and kind of growing from there.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah.
And so with that start, what type of assets were you guys focused on? Value add, Class A? Talk to us about your criteria and then the growth you had to end up, writing your own book too.
Yeah. Well, I always wanted to find value add opportunities. As we talked earlier, yes, if you buy a property, eventually it should go up over time in the long term. But I don't want to, bet on forces that are sort of out of my control. But if I can actually force the value to go up by forcing appreciation, by making improvements to the property, that was something that I wanted to do. And then if I had the natural appreciation, that would just be, gravy on top of it. So, and luckily we had a lot of gravy in those earlier years. We had some really strong tailwinds and were able to buy properties, operate them for 2 to 3 years, sell them, some cases double our money in like 2 years, which was like incredible, and move on. And I was growing both a limited partner portfolio along with a general partner portfolio. So as a limited partner, I was just an investor in deals. I didn't do anything else except, I would need to vet the person and vet the deal and make sure I feel comfortable with them, and then write a check and then just kind of hope that they did what they do.
I hope you're enjoying today's episode. Just a quick reminder to make sure you never miss an episode. Stay connected with us by following us on social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, TikTok at Chris_Salerno_. And don't forget to subscribe to YouTube to catch the video versions of our episode. You'll get exclusive content, behind the scenes footage, and much more. Head over to YouTube, Chris_Salerno now, and hit the subscribe button. Stay tuned because we've got more great content coming right after this.
And then that portfolio now is over 7,000 apartments that I've invested in.
Love that.
As a limited partner. As a general partner, I've grown my portfolio to over getting close to 5,000 units now.
Wow.
A little over $650 million of assets under management. And those are deals that I am very active in, from the identification of the properties through the acquisition, through the asset management. When I worked in New York and worked in the advertising industry, I was a project manager. So I'm a PMI certified project management professional, which means I'm really good at managing people, budgets, and timelines.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've taken that skill set, and instead of using it on advertising projects, I work with that on real estate projects. So very, skills that are very much convertible into another industry, which has been helpful.
No, I definitely can see how that can be helpful substantially. When it comes to the criteria and assets, locations, how are you guys determining that? Especially, right now, are you guys buying? What are you guys doing right now to stay active?
Well, I've always been very pragmatic in my approach. I've only done, I think the busiest year that I had, we closed on 3 deals, but I usually do about 1 to 2 deals a year. And this was in times when, people were doing a deal every month.
Yeah.
But, unfortunately, a lot of those people who were doing a deal every month kind of got caught.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not saying that everything that I've done has turned to gold, but it's allowed us to have, I think, a little more longevity in the work that we're doing. So I look for the right opportunities. As an example, last year in 2003, I only did 1 deal. It was a large deal. It was a $150 million purchase. It was a 3-property portfolio. We were able to purchase a property from a seller who had some fixed rate debt, which the properties that we bought were fixed rate debt, but he had a lot of variable rate debt too. And so with rates going through the roof, at that time, interest rates on a multifamily property could be 7 to 8% interest rate. We were able to acquire this portfolio and assume the existing debt, which was at 3.8% interest.
Wow.
We got it at a great basis. So, it was a great opportunity for us. It was also good for that person because they needed cash to bolster the rest of their portfolio, and they had those properties for about 3 years. So they had added some value. So they made a little bit of profit that they could put in to keep the rest of their portfolio alive, which was nice for them. It was also a fantastic deal for us. The deal that I'm doing right now is a deal in Atlanta, 240 units that we're purchasing, and we're purchasing at a 30% discount for what it was Sorry?
Love the Atlanta market. We're buying
yeah.
we're buying car washes all around Atlanta.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah, love that
Yeah,
market.
and so this is in McDonough, if you know McDonough.
Yep.
And so there's a tremendous amount of growth that we're seeing there.
There is.
And we're able to buy this property at a 30% discount to, it was in contract two years ago, 24 months ago. And we're getting at a 30% discount to that price.
Wow.
What happened was the interest rates were going up at that time. The person who was purchasing the property tried to retrade, and the sellers said, no, we've got 2 more years on our debt, so we're gonna ride it out. And unfortunately, it took longer for the interest rates to come back down, and their debt has expired.
Wow.
Or is just about to expire next month, and they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. And we're able to come in here and save them from that, having a foreclosure or anything, but still getting things at a great basis. We've got nice fixed interest rate, longer term debt. So it's going to be a really good one.
No, I love it. I think definitely, with the interest rates taking so long to rebound, I think for those that are kind of in trouble or, kind of, let's say, just in rough waters, the biggest thing is that if you can hold out till 2026, 2027 with those deals. I think rents will rebound. I think the biggest issue is you just couldn't push rents in a lot of these markets. And that's what I saw in certain markets in Florida, Texas. You can't push rents.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is difficult to push rents depending on, the asset that you have in the submarket, but there is a lot of, resistance. Although in the past couple of months, we've seen a lot of movement actually in that direction, which has been positive for us. But the biggest problem, I think, is the way that these deals were structured.
That too.
And so you've got people who just bought things at a very, very high valuation and had a very low cost of capital because they were able to get it at a lower interest rate. And even if it was fixed or variable, in 2006 and 2007, if their debt's coming due and they need to refinance into, look, you can get multifamily debt right now. You can get agency debt, depending on the property and the experience level of the sponsorship group, between 5 to 6%. You can get stuff in the mid 5s pretty easily right now. But that's nothing compared to 3% that people were getting in the past.
No.
And
plus the leverage. I mean, a lot of people got 80, 90% leverage if you throw, pref or mezzanine on it.
So now if you're trying to go into an agency debt, they're going to want to see a DSCR of at least 1.25%. Right?
Yeah.
So they're going to maybe give you 75%, maybe 70% leverage. So you got to close the gap on the leverage, number one. And then number two, you're looking at, maybe, almost twice what your interest rate was previously. Yeah. So a lot of those people, regardless of rent growth, are going to have a little bit of a difficult time. So I don't know that 2006 or 2007 is going to be enough to save them. It may be. We'll have to see what happens. I just don't see rates going back down to 3%.
Well, I don't see rates going back down, but I do see, with my statement of 2026, 2027, I don't see rates going back down. To that extent, I do see us being able to push rents. And so that's where we could go ahead and generate that value, is increasing those rents. So I believe in 2026, 2027, we're going to be able to creep rents back up, because the past 2 years, I know for the markets we were in, we just couldn't push rents because everyone had occupancy issues in the whole market. So everyone had to decrease their rents to get their occupancy up to, sustain cash flow. And so we had to decrease rents on some properties. So we had high occupancy because, Stephanie would come in and say, well, Matt's property's cheaper. And so we're just going to go to Matt's property. And it's like, well, now we have to lower our rents so we can compete.
Sure.
But I think what I'm seeing is going into 2025, and I think it's going to happen to the middle to Q4 of 2025, rents are going to start to increase to where we want them to, which is going to increase the valuation. Again, I agree with you. I would be shocked if we get rates down into the 3s again.
But do you think that the rent growth within a year or two is going to be, because it takes a full year to get through that rent roll.
Correct.
Do you think that's going to be enough to cover?
My honest opinion?
Yeah.
No. Because I think there's going to be a bunch of supply that hits the market,
and
I think it's going to really hinder the rents.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I think it's going to be higher than what it is today in 2024, but I think those days, and this is what I saw in 2022, that's why we sold 4 of our assets in 2022, is I saw we were getting $200-$300 rent increases, and our property management team was coming back and was like, we are not doing anything but paint and carpet. And I'm like, that's great, but that's not going to last. There's no way that's going to last. So I was like, sell off what we can sell off right now. Let's take advantage of it. And I think those days of bumping $200, $300, $400 rent increases are really going to be over because of the supply that's going to be coming on, I believe, in 2026, 2027, 2028. Because of these lower interest rates, you're going to see developers kick back up and start developing, but those rates are not going, they're going to be very competitive for that newer type of product, which is going to be a domino effect for the other classes, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we're going to have to see what happens. One of the things that's good for people, who have deals in Texas right now. Are you familiar with the whole HFC, PFC thing?
Well, I know it's supposed to go away next summer, so everyone has to get in when they can.
We'll see when it goes away. I think I've heard even as far as Q1 of next year.
Wow.
We'll see. I don't know exactly how all the legislative stuff works there.
A lot of politics.
But being able to,
that saved a lot of people's deals.
One of these programs, and you can, basically eliminate $1 million a year or more on property taxes. Yeah. You boost your NOI by $1 million.
That's huge.
You're adding value.
Yeah.
You're adding a lot of value, and then you're able to basically cover the variance in the leverage between the 70 to 80%, right? And refinance into, a 5-7 year term loan.
Yeah, and from what I heard is that can be transferable depending if you go to PFC or there's also HOC, which I've heard of, but depending on who you go with, I heard that is also transferable. My question, I would definitely look at the exit strategy. When that is underwritten, what is that buyer going to assume? Are they going to assume it with a couple years and then they're going to have to start paying those taxes? What does that look like on the back end?
My understanding of it is once it's in place, it's in place and in perpetuity if you want it to be. And you can exit out of it. You're not required to stay in it.
Because it's a ground lease, essentially.
At any time, yes.
Yeah.
At any time you can pull back out of it and basically unwind. You basically unwind it.
Yeah.
And then on a sale of the property, you could either unwind it or you have to pay a fee for it to transfer to the new ownership.
Yeah, I know that's definitely saved a lot of people. So I'm glad it has, and I'm interested to see how long it actually lasts, and then that conversion rate. So when people start to exit with that, what does that look like? So we'll definitely see. I want to chat with the Backstage Guide to Real Estate. Did you use Backstage because of you being a performer?
Yeah, you bet.
I figured.
Bet. I sure did.
What prompted you to say, okay, everything that's up in my mind, I want to go ahead and write a book to help educate other people?
Yeah, I feel like I do want to help other people. I've gotten to a point in my life where I'm, sort of W-2 optional, right? Yeah. I'm work optional. And it's been phenomenal for me and for my lifestyle, for my relationships with my family and things like that. And so if I can sort of help other people do that, because I know for me, it was hard to navigate and figure out how to do this. So, the impetus behind the book, Backstage Guide to Real Estate, really came out of a meetup group that I was running when I was living in Boston, where people were coming up to me wanting to go ahead and invest in these multifamily syndications and didn't know how to look at these deals. Yeah. And I was looking at deals by these people who were putting out deals every month and just writing super loosey-goosey. And I was like, wow, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
I've looked at some and I'm just like, your cash flows 1%. And in the whole first year, I'm like, if anything happens, you're done.
Yeah.
It's so risky.
And underwriting, ridiculous rent growth.
No
or
reserves.
Buying something at like a 7 cap and saying we're going to exit at a 4 cap. Like all kinds of crazy stuff.
I know.
And so I wanted to basically protect the other passive investors that I knew. They would come to me, I would spend time with them, and I was just basically running out of time. So I said, well, why don't I write it all down? So that was really the main impetus behind the book and getting it started. And since the book came out and I published the book a few years ago, now I'm actually coaching people who actually want to go ahead and scale up their real estate, right? Scale up their real estate portfolios. So, I have a bunch of students now that I teach how to syndicate deals and how to do them in a responsible way, but also a way where they can become work optional themselves.
No, I love that. And how has capital raising been for you the past couple of years? I know it's definitely been very difficult. I remember raising capital with the Trump and Biden administration, or their presidency going into it. I remember prior to that too, raising capital. That's definitely been questions. I've had emails from investors on, hey, what's your opinion if so-and-so wins? And I'm like, okay, well, I got to be very neutral. So how's capital raising been for you, and where do you see, that going in the near future?
The capital raising for me has been pretty steady all throughout my career. The level of interest, I think, really has to do with the quality of the deal.
Yeah.
When I have a really good quality deal, they're beating down the doors. Now, I will say, 3 or 4 years ago, when I would have a deal, we would fill up in like 36 hours or 48 hours. It would fill up very quickly, and we would go straight to waiting list. Nowadays, we still tend to go on a waiting list. Actually, I've never done a deal that hasn't gone on a waiting list.
Love that.
But sometimes it'll be like 3 or 4 weeks before the waiting list.
Oh, yeah.
So, that deal last summer that I was talking about, that big deal, I was very concerned with what was it going to, because it had been about a year since I had raised capital on a deal before. And this was a great deal that we had under our belt, and we loved the deal, but it was like, well, are the investors going to come along? They did. They came right along. They saw the opportunity. So same thing's happening now. Right now, we're recording this at the end of October. I've got a live deal going on right now, and it's a little slow. I think people are like, well, what's going to happen with the election?
I know.
I don't know what the outcome of the election really has anything to do with this investment opportunity.
That's what I always say, is no matter what, if Harris gets in, you still got to invest for the next 4 years. You can't take a pause on your life for 4 years. And same with Trump. If he gets in, you can't hold off on, 4 years of not doing anything. So you have to focus on the investment opportunity right now.
Yeah, and we're looking to hold the property for about 5 years. So there'll be a new person.
President,
I mean, I don't know. I get, Trump cannot or shouldn't
Trump
run
can't,
again.
but yeah, Harris could.
Harris could. The concern that I heard from some people, which I think is unfounded, was a concern about, well, if Harris wins, and then are they going to put rent control in for the whole United States or something like that? And I honestly don't see that happening. No. You would have to have not a Democratic sweep of Congress, but a whole progressive sweep of all of Congress, because a lot of Democrats in Congress are property owners and understand the economics and understand that property owners, most of us are good guys, but we have to be able to pay our property taxes and insurance to be able to have properties and upkeep our properties and keep them in good repair for the people who live there.
I mean, that's the big issue about Manhattan too. A lot of owners in Manhattan are called slumlords, and it's because, they can't increase rents substantially.
Well, that I live in New York City, so I also don't own anything in New York City except my primary residence. Boston went through a whole thing where they had rent control, and they rolled it back.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Because they found that it didn't really work. It didn't allow them to do what they wanted to. And New York, it's really the state, has imposed a lot of rent control and rent stabilization. And from an investor's perspective, let's say you already own it. Well, first off, people aren't going to want to buy those properties. And if you already own it, but your property taxes keep going up and up, but your
insurance goes up, your taxes go up, and then your cash flow starts to get lower, and it's like, well, I can't.
Or your cash flow goes away,
and then it's like I can't do anything.
Yeah, and so they can't improve the property because they don't have the capital for it.
And then it actually, thinking of it into that perspective, it actually, decreases the property value, essentially.
Correct. And it lowers the standard of living for the people who are living there.
Yeah.
So I'm all for, there was a blueprint. I did a whole YouTube video on it. The Biden administration a few years ago did a blueprint for a renter's bill of rights. And if you've watched my stuff on YouTube or seen me on social media, one of the things I'm always talking about is being a landlord who's a good person, trying to reinvent property ownership as a positive for communities and elevating and making life better for the residents of our properties. I think that's really important. And so I love the idea of a blueprint for a renter's bill of rights, because renters do have certain rights that they should have, but also the property owners need a bill of rights as well, and need to be able to make money to have money to put
100%.
back into the property. And that's what I think they saw in Boston was that the quality of life for the people was just going down the tubes.
Yeah.
And so they pulled it. And now, sure, there's still a housing shortage, but there is across the entire United States.
Correct.
But I think they're seeing some really nice positive movement.
Yeah, most definitely. Oh, wow. Never knew that about Boston. It's a beautiful city. I'm going there actually in a couple weeks again, and it is beautiful down there. Gorgeous.
I lived there for 4 years, and I love Boston. It's great.
It is. The people there, the food there. I like Cape Cod. When I went to Cape Cod. Spent some time on Cape Cod. That was nice.
Yeah?
I got to go to Martha's Vineyard next time.
Nice.
I got to try that out. I think that would be fun. Has anyone ever told you look like Marcus Lamona off The Prophet?
I don't know who Marcus Lamona is.
He's a very successful business owner.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome. I'll share a picture
Years
with
ago, people used to say that I look like a young Tom Hanks, but I haven't gotten that in like 20 years. But people used to say that.
I'll share a picture with you. Very, very successful business owner, goes around helps businesses.
Marcus Lamona.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look him up.
Yeah, we'll look him up after this. But Matt, thank you so much for a wealth of knowledge. I really enjoyed you coming on. I enjoy our friendship. You know, it's wild when we look back on how long we've known each other. So I just want to appreciate you for coming on and glad we're able to connect.
Well, Chris, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Most definitely. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chris Salerno Show. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and gained valuable insight to help you along your journey. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. If you have any questions or topics that you would like to cover, feel free to reach out directly to me. Shoot me a message on Instagram at Chris_Salerno_. Until next time, keep pushing forward and stay inspired.